Hello, this is Samuel Guy in Hawaii, and like all Borderlands games, Borderlands 4 has already its own drop rate controversy, specifically designated legendary drops. Most BO4 bosses currently have drop pools of at least 3 items, items which have an increased chance to drop specifically from them. If we really want those items, we should farm those bosses. We don't know the actual precise dedicated drop rates at this point. People have been doing tests of 100, 500, even 1,000 runs on this or that boss and counting their drops. And by their calculations, the rates are decidedly lower than they are in Borderlands 3. And I don't disagree. Some are saying that the drop rates are too low. They're saying that based on these tests and their own farming experience. Some are saying that whatever the rate is, it is nowhere near the average 10% rate in Borderlands 2 or the 15% rate in Borderlands 3, and that this is a problem. Two things about that supposed problem. First, the perception that rates are too low is at least in part just that, a subjective perception. Anytime we farm something in Borderlands, the longer it takes to get that item to drop, the easier it is for us to become frustrated by that perceived run of bad luck. And believing that the rates in previous games are apparently higher feeds that perception. Even if we are getting the item on a somewhat regular basis, we perceive that we are not getting it as often as we should, and that becomes a problem. Okay. Second thing to understand, though, and bear with me here, is that we cannot directly compare drop rates in Borderlands 4 to the rates in previous Borderlands games because Borderlands 4 does designated drops differently. Okay, in Borderlands 4, items in the designated loot pool get their own separate chance to drop each run. Most bosses have 3 items in their pool, and we have a chance to get 1, 2, or even all 3 whenever we defeat that boss. In Borderlands 3, however, in most cases, whenever we defeat a boss with 2 or more items in its loot pool, the game first generates a random number to see if we gain access to that pool. And if we do that successfully, only then does it roll to see which item in the pool we get. Okay. When we look at Loot Lemon, we see that Chivalrous here has 2 drops, each with a 50% drop chance. What's actually going on here, however, is that Chivalrous has a loot pool with a 30% drop chance. We have a 30% chance each run to access that pool. Once we access that pool, we then have a 50% chance to get one item or the other. In the long run, this works out to an average of 15% drop chance for each item, and Loot Lemon is simply doing the math for us. The problem with that system is not that we can never get both items to drop at the same time. In the long run, 15% is 50%. The problem is that one item can, in the short run, effectively prevent the other from dropping. Okay. I did a video on probability back in the early days of Borderlands 3 in which I conducted a test. I flipped a coin 100 times, and as luck would have it, I got exactly 50 heads and 50 tails. However, in the process of doing that, I saw runs of 2, 3, 4, 5, and in one case, 7 of the same result in a row. 7 tails. Okay. This can happen in Borderlands 3. It happened to me in the last Borderlands 3 hunt. I was farming the aforementioned Chivalrous for his 2 drops, a class mod and a pistol, 50% drop chance for each. 15% is 1 chance in 6.7. Meaning, on average, we should see one or the other drop every 6 to 7 runs. But it took me 47 runs to get both items. Okay, I got about a dozen drops in those 47 runs, a bit under 30%, but I was still getting access to his loot pool often enough. The problem was, after getting that access, I kept getting the class mod. I got like 9 of those class mods in a row before the pistol finally dropped. I experienced the equivalent of the 7 tails in a row streak when it came down to the second roll each run where he drops something. Okay, this sort of thing cannot happen in Borderlands 4, and that changes how things work. That's why we can't just compare the rates of one to another, assuming we know them, and say smaller is too small. Now, does that mean the rates are just fine? I don't know. There will always be people who say it's too low. For myself, after over 250 hours, I think they are fine, but I wouldn't mind if they raise them a bit, whatever they actually are. This doesn't settle the debate, it just hopefully better informs it. Okay, if you like this kind of content, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, stay safe, and thanks for watching.